Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Galactic bureaucracy has a particular smell to it. Not metaphorically, mind you, but literally. It's a combination of recycled air, anxiety sweat from 6 dozen species, and the faint metallic tang of self-importance. Helen could smell it now as 4 armored guards dragged her down the pristine corridors of High Council Station, her boots scraping against polished floors that probably cost more than her entire research budget. "You're making a mistake," she said, not for the first time. Not even for the 10th time, if she was being honest. The lead guard, a towering mass of chitinous plates and too many joints, didn't respond. Guards never responded. That was apparently a universal constant, even out here among the stars. They rounded a corner, and Helen caught a glimpse through a viewport of the planet below. Ormthesa. Beautiful, wild, and utterly doomed if these bureaucratic parasites had their way. 6 months she'd spent down there. 6 months of mud, rain, biting insects the size of her thumb, and 3 of the most magnificent creatures she'd ever encountered. 3 creatures who were currently shrieking their hearts out somewhere in this sterile nightmare of a station. She could hear them, faint but unmistakable. The subsonic rumble and trill combination that Nithara used when they were distressed. Her chest tightened. They were calling for her. "They're scared," Helen said, trying to keep her voice level. "They're just babies. They don't understand what's happening." Still nothing from the guards. "You know what? Forget it. You probably couldn't understand them anyway. Takes actual empathy for that." The chitinous one's mandibles clicked, which Helen had learned meant irritation. Good. She was irritated too. The corridor opened into a massive chamber, all vaulted ceilings and unnecessary grandeur. The High Council chamber, where important people made important decisions that usually screwed over someone who actually knew what they were talking about. Helen had been in academic committee meetings before. This was just the cosmic scale version, complete with floating platforms and bioluminescent mood lighting. On the central platform stood Lormac, Council Prime, and Chief Pain in Helen's backside. He was real Ani, which meant he looked vaguely like someone had taken a dolphin, given it arms, covered it in opalescent scales, and taught it to be condescending. He was very, very good at condescending. Helen of Planet, designated as Dirtball, Lormac began, because apparently Earth didn't rate its actual name in official proceedings. "You stand accused of 43 violations of Galactic Conservation Protocol, 18 counts of endangering indigenous species, and 1 count of being spectacularly stupid." "Pretty sure that last one isn't actually on the books," Helen muttered. "It should be." Lormac's translator couldn't quite capture his tone, but Helen got the gist. He thought she was an idiot. "You have been cohabitating with 3 juvenile Nithara for a period of 6 standard months. Do you deny this?" "Nope." Helen straightened her shoulders. "I found them orphaned and I took care of them. That's literally my job description." "Your job," Lormac said, his scales rippling in what Helen had learned meant barely contained rage, was to observe and catalogue, not to play house with apex predators. Their mother was killed by poachers. An unfortunate incident, and they would have died without intervention. That is the natural order. Helen felt something hot and sharp rise in her throat. Natural order. You want to talk about natural order? Poachers with off-world weapons slaughtering protected species for sport is natural? Lormac's eyes, all 3 of them, narrowed. "You overstep, human." "I'm just getting started." A new voice cut through the chamber, light and melodic. Perhaps we should hear her reasoning before we condemn her? Helen turned. The speaker was Ollie Wynne, a member of the council from the Ithqual homeworld. She was bird-like, with iridescent feathers and intelligent eyes that actually seemed to focus on Helen as an individual rather than a problem to be solved. "There is no reasoning," Lormac snapped. "Nithara are classified as megafauna category predators. Adult specimens have been documented taking down prey 3 times their size. Their jaw strength can crush Duralloy, and this human has been sleeping in the same den as 3 of them." "They're cubs," Helen said. "Babies. Yes, they'll grow up to be apex predators, but right now they're scared kids who just lost their mother and don't understand why the only other being who showed them kindness is being taken away." "Anthropomorphization," Lormac said smugly. "Classic human failing. You project your own emotions onto animals incapable of reciprocating them." Oh, Helen had words for that. So many words. Most of them would probably get her thrown out an airlock, but it might be worth it just to see the look on his smug, scaled face. Before she could unleash them, another sound cut through the chamber. A roar. No, 3 roars, harmonizing in a way that made the walls vibrate and every guard in the room reach for their weapons. The cubs. Helen's heart lurched. They sounded closer now. Pitch would be in front, because he was always in front, the brave idiot. Whisper would be behind him, probably shaking but refusing to leave her brothers. And Rumble would be at the rear, scared out of his mind but following because family stayed together. She'd taught them that. Family stays together. "Where are they?" Helen demanded. "What have you done with them?" "The specimens have been relocated to appropriate containment," Lormac said. "They will be studied, catalogued, and eventually returned to a controlled environment on Ormthesa, far from misguided humans who think they can domesticate the wild." "I wasn't domesticating them, you pompous fish. I was raising them, teaching them to hunt, to socialize, to survive. Everything their mother would have done if she hadn't been murdered." "Murdered," Lormac repeated, tasting the word. "Interesting choice. You assign moral weight to the death of an animal." "She was a person," Helen said quietly. "Maybe not by your definition, but she was thinking, feeling, protecting her young. I watched her for months before the poachers came. I saw her teach the cubs which plants were safe, which water sources to avoid. I saw her mourn when one of her cubs died before I could intervene. So, yes, murder." The chamber fell silent. Even the guards seemed uncomfortable. Olliwyn spoke again, gentler this time. "You formed an attachment." "I did my job," Helen corrected. "My job is understanding these creatures, and you can't understand something by keeping it in a cage and poking it with sensors. You have to live with it, breathe with it, learn its language." "Language?" Lormac scoffed. "They're animals. They don't have language." Subsonic rumbles combined with scent marking and body position. 18 distinct vocalizations I've documented, each with specific meaning. They have grammar, syntax, even what I'd call humor. Helen met his eyes, all 3 of them. "But sure, let's go with your theory. I'm just a crazy human projecting onto dumb animals." Another roar echoed through the station, closer now. Helen heard something else beneath it, a rhythmic thumping, like something heavy hitting reinforced walls. Lormac's scales rippled again. "Security Chief Nalgoth, why are the specimens still audible?" A new figure emerged from the shadows. Nalgoth was Prendal, which meant he looked like someone's nightmare of what an insect should be if it stood 2.5 meters tall and had an exoskeleton that could probably stop small arms fire. His voice came through a translator as a series of clicks and whistles rendered into flat, emotionless words. The specimens are contained in reinforced holding on level 9. The walls are rated for creatures twice their size. They are simply loud. Make them quiet. We've attempted auditory dampeners. They're ineffective. The specimens are broadcasting below standard hearing range for most species. The human is likely the only one experiencing the full effect. Helen's chest ached. She could feel their distress like a physical thing, pressing against her ribs. Pitch was probably throwing himself against the walls. Whisper would be crying, that high-pitched keen she made when she had nightmares. And Rumble would be trying to dig because, when Rumble got stressed, he dug. "You're torturing them," Helen said. "We're containing them," Lormac corrected, "as we will now contain you. Guards, take her to holding cell 12. Maximum security. And someone shut those creatures up before I authorize tranquilizers." "Don't you dare!" Helen snarled as the guards grabbed her again. "They're already terrified. You tranquilize them, and they'll think they're under attack. They'll think I abandoned them." "You did abandon them," Lormac said. "The moment you decided to play mother to monsters." Helen tried to lunge at him. She really did. Got about half a meter before the guards yanked her back, their grip like industrial clamps. "They're not monsters! They're children!" "Remove her." The guards dragged her toward an exit. Helen fought every step, not because she thought she could escape, but because she needed them to know she hadn't given up. Needed the cubs to hear that she was still fighting. As they pulled her through the doorway, she caught one last glimpse of Lormac, looking satisfied and smug, and so utterly certain of his righteousness. And she thought, not for the first time in her life, that sometimes the real monsters wore suits and sat in fancy chairs. The holding cell was exactly what Helen expected. Small, sterile, with walls that hummed with some kind of energy field probably designed to keep her from doing anything interesting like escaping or maintaining her dignity. There was a bench that might generously be called a bed, a sanitation unit that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd heard about toilets but never actually seen one, and absolutely nothing else. No windows, no screens, no way to know if it was day or night, though on a space station that distinction was pretty meaningless anyway. She sat on the bench and put her head in her hands. Somewhere in this station, 3 cubs were locked in a cage, crying for the only mother they had left. And she couldn't do anything about it. Helen had spent her entire adult life working with animals that most people feared. Big cats back on Earth, then the mega-lizards on Proxima Colony, then finally out here on the edge of explored space, studying creatures that evolution had honed into perfect predators. She'd been clawed, bitten, nearly trampled more times than she could count, but she'd never felt as helpless as she did right now. The cubs' cries were fainter here, muffled by distance and walls, and probably several levels of station infrastructure, but she could still hear them if she concentrated, still feel them, in that weird way she'd developed over the past 6 months, like they were part of her nervous system now, an extension of her own awareness. Pitch's roar had a particular quality to it, defiant, angry, scared. He'd always been the brave one, the first to investigate new things, the first to try hunting techniques Helen demonstrated. But he was also young, barely 6 months old, and for all his bluster, he was still a baby who needed reassurance and routine, and someone to tell him the scary noises in the night weren't going to hurt him. Whisper's cries were quieter, but somehow worse. That keening sound she made, pure distress, the audio equivalent of a child sobbing. She'd always been the anxious one, the cub who stuck close to Helen's side and startled at sudden movements. It had taken weeks for her to trust Helen enough to sleep without touching her. Now she was alone in a strange place with strange smells, and no one to comfort her. And Rumble. Poor Rumble, who'd probably already worked himself into a state and wouldn't eat for days because stress killed his appetite, and he'd make himself sick. He was the gentle one, the cub who'd bring Helen dead things as presents, and then be baffled when she didn't want to eat them. The one who'd curl up on her feet during cold nights and purr like an earthquake. Helen's eyes burned. She didn't cry often. Hadn't cried in years, actually. But sitting in this cell, listening to her cubs suffer and being unable to do anything about it, she felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry, babies. I tried." The station hummed around her, indifferent to her grief. Somewhere above, Lormac was probably celebrating. Another dangerous human put in her place. Another example made for anyone else who thought they could challenge council authority. Helen wiped her eyes and leaned back against the wall. The metal was cold against her shoulders. 3 days. That's what Nalgoth had said when they processed her. 3 days until her official hearing, where the council would formally decide her fate. 3 days of sitting in this box while the cubs cried themselves hoarse. She closed her eyes and tried to send them something, anything. A feeling of safety. A promise that she hadn't forgotten them. And in the darkness behind her eyelids, Helen started planning. Because there was one thing Lormac and his precious council hadn't counted on. Helen had spent 6 months learning to think like a Nithara. Learning their language, their instincts, their problem-solving methods. She knew how they communicated, how they navigated, how they understood the world. And if there was one thing Nithara were very, very good at, it was finding their way home. 3 days, Helen thought. 3 days until the hearing. She smiled in the darkness. She wouldn't need 3 days. Nalgoth had been security chief of High Council Station for 12 orbital cycles. In that time, he'd dealt with smugglers, saboteurs, the occasional drunk ambassador, and one memorable incident involving a species that could phase through solid matter when properly motivated. He thought he'd seen everything. He was wrong. "Say that again," he said to the guard standing in front of his desk, mandibles clicking in what anyone who knew Prenadal body language would recognize as confusion. "The human is gone, sir." "Gone?" "Yes, sir." "From a maximum security cell." "Yes, sir." "With energy barriers rated to contain species capable of molecular reconstruction." "Yes, sir." Nalgoth's secondary eyes swiveled to examine the guard more closely, looking for signs of intoxication or mental breakdown. "And the door?" "Still locked, sir. No signs of tampering. Energy barriers still active. She's just not there anymore." This was going to be a very long day. The cell looked exactly as it should. Locked door, humming barriers, everything functioning perfectly. Except for the complete absence of one human female who should absolutely, definitely, still be inside. Nalgoth accessed the surveillance footage, running it back through the past 6 hours. Helen sitting on the bench, Helen lying down, Helen staring at the ceiling. Then, between one frame and the next, an empty cell. No flicker, no distortion, no indication of technological interference. One moment, human. Next moment, no human. "Impossible," he muttered. "Sir?" The guard shifted nervously. "Run a diagnostic on the surveillance system, full sweep. Check for temporal anomalies, holographic interference, anything that could explain a visual gap." "Already done, sir. System's clean." Of course it was. Nalgoth pulled up the containment facility on level 9. The Nithara cubs were still there, 3 heat signatures in their reinforced cage. Except, he zoomed in on the footage. 2 heat signatures. Security team to level 9 containment. Now. By the time Nalgoth arrived, the chaos was already in full swing. Guards surrounded the containment unit, weapons drawn, while inside the cage, 2 cubs huddled together, making distressed sounds that set Nalgoth's antennae vibrating uncomfortably. "Where's the third one?" he demanded. "Gone, sir," another guard reported. "Same as the human. One scan shows 3 cubs, next scan shows 2. No breach, no alarm, nothing." Nalgoth examined the cage. Reinforced walls, energy ceiling, multiple redundant locking mechanisms. The kind of containment that could hold a full-grown Nithara, let alone a cub. Then he saw it. The ventilation grate. Standard model. Designed to allow airflow while preventing anything larger than a small rodent from passing through. The metal was bent. Not broken, not cut. Bent, as if something had gripped it, and slowly, patiently forced it open. The gap was maybe 30 centimeters wide. "Get me internal scans of the ventilation system," Nalgoth said. "All levels." The scans came back, showing exactly what he feared. Trace amounts of human sweat in the ductwork between level 9 and level 12. Claw marks scratched into the metal lining. A trail leading from the cub containment directly to Helen's cell. "She called them," Olliwyn said from behind him. Nalgoth turned. The council member had arrived unannounced, her feathers slightly ruffled in what he'd learned meant concern. "That's impossible," Nalgoth said. "The cells are sound-dampened." "Not for subsonic frequencies." Olliwyn tilted her head. "You read her file, yes? 6 months with those cubs. She learned their language. She didn't just learn it. She became fluent in it." "So she called them," Nalgoth said slowly. "And one of them, the smallest one." "Whisper," Olliwyn supplied. "The anxious one. The one most bonded to Helen. Crawled through the ventilation system to reach her. And once the cub reached her cell, it bent the equal— Great there, too. From the inside. Let her out." Nalgoth pulled up the schematics of Helen's cell. Sure enough, there was the ventilation grate, standard issue, accessible from inside the cell. He switched to current footage. The grate was bent outward. "They're in the walls," he said. "They're in the walls," Olliwyn agreed. She sounded almost amused. "This is not funny?" "It's a little funny. You have to admit, it's impressive. How long have they been gone?" "Approximately 6 hours." 6 hours. Olliwyn's feathers fluffed. In 6 hours, a human and 3 apex predator cubs have vanished into a space station housing 2,000 inhabitants from 60 different species, and your security system has no idea where they are. "We'll find them." "Will you?" She's had 6 months to teach those cubs things. Stealth, coordination, problem-solving. And now she's loose in an environment full of maintenance tunnels, cargo bays, and enough hiding spots to lose an army. Nalgoth's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "Council Prime Lormac is going to— lose his mind?" Olliwyn finished. Yes, he is. I'm looking forward to it." "You're enjoying this?" "Immensely." She fixed him with one bright eye. "I warned him, you know. Warned them all. Never underestimate human adaptability. They're persistence hunters. They don't give up. They don't quit. And they form bonds that transcend logic. She's one human with 3 cubs against an entire security force." "Exactly," Olliwyn said, "which is why I'd bet on her." Nalgoth was about to respond when his communicator chirped. He activated it. "Sir, we found something in the central data hub. Someone accessed restricted council files Approximately 5 hours ago. Financial records, communications logs, mining surveys. Helen? Has to be, sir. But that's not the concerning part. What's the concerning part? She copied everything. And, sir, the files she accessed were all related to Ormthesa, specifically to mining rights and Council Prime Lormac's private investments. Nalgoth and Olywin looked at each other. She's not just escaping, Olywin said softly. She's building a case. Against Lormac. Against the entire Council operation on Ormthesa. Nalgoth's antennae twitched. If she has evidence of corruption, then she's not running away, Olywin finished. She's preparing for war. Lormac's scales had turned a particular shade of violet that everyone in the council chamber recognized as barely suppressed fury. He paced the platform, his movements sharp and aggressive, while 36 council members watched in various states of concern, or, in Olywin's case, poorly concealed amusement. 6 hours, he hissed. 6 hours, and your entire security apparatus cannot locate 1 human and 3 animals. Nalgoth stood at attention, his exoskeleton reflecting the chamber's bioluminescent lighting. The station spans 52 levels with over 300 kilometers of maintenance tunnels. We're conducting systematic sweeps. I don't want systematic sweeps. I want results. Lormac rounded on him. How did she even escape in the first place? The cub came to her. Silence fell over the chamber. Excuse me? Lormac's voice dropped to something dangerous. The smallest cub, Whisper, navigated the ventilation system from level 9 to level 12. She bent the grate from inside and freed Helen. Then they returned for the other 2 cubs. Through the ventilation system. Yes, Council Prime. A system designed to prevent exactly that kind of breach. The design specifications didn't account for Nithura problem-solving capabilities, Nalgoth said carefully, or for a human who could communicate complex instructions through walls using subsonic frequencies. Lormac's scales rippled. You're telling me she talked a cub through a rescue operation? More accurately, she called for help and the cub figured out how to provide it. Nalgoth pulled up a holographic display showing the ventilation routes. Nithara cubs are considerably more flexible than adults. Whisper was able to compress her body structure to fit through spaces we considered impassable. Then seal the ventilation system. Cut off their air supply if you have to. That would kill approximately 2,000 station inhabitants, Olywin interjected smoothly, including several council members who rather enjoy breathing. Lormac shot her a venomous look. You find this amusing? I find incompetence amusing. You imprisoned a conservation specialist who spent half an orbital cycle living with apex predators, and you're surprised she knows how to disappear. Olywin preened a few feathers. I believe the human expression is, you played yourself. She's a criminal. She's a woman protecting her cubs, Olywin corrected. And before you sputter about anthropomorphization again, perhaps you should consider why the cubs came for her. Animals don't risk their lives for handlers. They risk their lives for family. The chamber erupted in multiple languages. Some council members argued for increased security measures. Others questioned whether Helen had committed any real crime. A few, Nalgoth noted, looked distinctly uncomfortable. Those would be the ones with financial ties to Ormthesa. His communicator chirped again. Security Chief, we have multiple sightings. Level 36, Cargo Bay 9. On my way. Nalgoth nodded to the council and left, grateful to escape the political nightmare unfolding behind him. Level 36 was industrial territory. All cargo containers and loading equipment and the perpetual smell of ozone from the transport systems. Nalgoth's team had cordoned off the bay, weapons drawn, surrounding a cluster of containers near the far wall. "Status?" Nalgoth asked. "Motion sensors detected movement approximately 3 minutes ago. Heat signatures confirm at least 2 large masses. Likely the Cubs. No visual confirmation yet." "And Helen?" "Human heat signatures are harder to distinguish from station ambient temperature. She could be anywhere in there." Nalgoth activated his helmet's enhanced vision, cycling through thermal, electromagnetic, and motion tracking modes. There. A flicker of movement between 2 containers, something large and low to the ground. "Hold your fire," he commanded. "I'm going in." "Sir, that's not." "Hold. Your fire." He advanced slowly, keeping his weapon lowered but ready. As he rounded the first container, he saw them. 2 Cubs. Pitch and Rumble, if he remembered correctly. They crouched side by side, crystalline scales gleaming in the dim lighting. Pitch was in front, lips pulled back to show teeth designed for tearing meat. Rumble behind him, larger but clearly nervous, making a low rumbling sound that Nalgoth felt in his chest cavity. No sign of Whisper or Helen. "Easy," Nalgoth said, knowing they couldn't understand him, but hoping tone would convey intent. "Nobody needs to get hurt," Pitch growled, a sound like rocks grinding together. Then something dropped from above. Helen landed on top of the container behind the Cubs, perfectly balanced, holding something in her hands. A data pad. She looked terrible, dirt-streaked and exhausted, her uniform torn in places, but her eyes were alert and focused. "Tell your team to lower their weapons," she said. "You know I can't do that." "Then people are going to get hurt." She gestured to the Cubs. "They're protecting me. That's what family does. You come at me, they come at you, and I promise you they're faster than your trigger fingers." Nalgoth's tactical computer agreed with her assessment. Cubs they might be, but Nithara could cover 10 meters in under 2 seconds. His guards would get maybe 1 shot before being overwhelmed. "What do you want, Helen?" "I want people to see this." She held up the data pad. "I want everyone to know what Lormac has been doing on Ormthesa. You accessed restricted council files. That's a serious crime. Not as serious as genocide." The word hung in the air like a blade. "Genocide," Nalgoth repeated. "The Nithara population on Ormthesa numbers approximately 800 individuals. Lormac has mining contracts waiting for council approval to strip mine the entire northern continent. That's where 70% of the Nithara live, where they hunt, breed, raise their cubs." Helen's voice cracked slightly. "The environmental impact assessment was falsified. I have the original. I have communications between Lormac and mining corporations. I have financial transfers that violate 6 different galactic conservation statutes." "That's a significant accusation." "It's the truth. The mother of these cubs, the one killed by poachers. Those poachers were hired by a company that Lormac owns through 3 shell corporations. They were clearing out the predators before mining operations began." Nalgoth's antennae went rigid. "You have proof?" "Every bite of it. Financial records, communications, contracts, even footage from the poacher's own helmet cameras." Helen's expression hardened. "He ordered the death of a mother protecting her cubs. He planned to exterminate an entire species, and when I tried to save 3 orphaned babies, he locked me up and called me the criminal." Behind Nalgoth, one of his guards shifted nervously. "Sir, should we?" "Wait." "But sir," I said, "wait." Nalgoth studied Helen, running probability calculations. She was intelligent, desperate, and fighting for something she believed in. That made her dangerous. It also made her possibly credible. If you have this evidence, why not present it at your hearing? Helen laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You think Lormac would let that evidence reach the hearing? The moment I'm back in custody, that data disappears. I get deported to some penal colony, the cubs get euthanized, and Ormthesa gets turned into an open pit mine. Everyone wins except the people who actually give a damn about the truth. So what's your plan? Hide in the walls forever? No. Helen straightened her shoulders. I'm going to broadcast this to every terminal on this station. Every screen, every data pad, every communications array. I'm going to make sure everyone sees what Lormac really is. You'll need access to the central communications hub for that? I know. Which is on level 10, central section, highest security area on the station. I know that too. You'll never make it. Helen smiled, and there was something fierce and wild in that expression. Something that reminded Nalgoth that humans were persistence hunters, that they'd climb to the top of their planet's food chain not through strength or speed, but through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. "Watch me," she said. Then she whistled, a sharp, clear sound, and the world exploded into motion. Whisper dropped from the ventilation shaft above the guards, landing among them with a shriek that sent 3 species scrambling backward. Pitch and Rumble charged forward, not attacking but creating chaos, their massive bodies knocking over equipment and guards alike. Helen ran. Nalgoth lunged after her, but Rumble planted himself in the path, lowering his head and making that rumbling sound again. Not aggressive. Defensive. "Move!" Nalgoth commanded. The cub didn't budge. Helen's voice echoed from somewhere in the maze of containers. "Rumble! With me!" The cub turned and bolted after her, leaving Nalgoth standing in the wreckage of his containment operation. Ollie Wynn's voice came through his communicator, sounding entirely too pleased. "Lost her again, did we?" "She's heading for communications." "Yes? I rather thought she might. You should probably stop her." "Should I?" Nalgoth watched as his guards slowly recovered. None seriously injured, but all thoroughly embarrassed. "Should I really?" "That depends, Security Chief. Do you believe in following orders? Or do you believe in doing what's right?" Nalgoth's mandibles clicked slowly. He pulled up the data Helen had accessed, using his security clearance to review the files she'd copied. Mining contracts, environmental falsifications, financial transfers, communications between Lormac and known criminal organizations, and footage, clear, undeniable footage of hired mercenaries gunning down a Nithara mother while she tried to protect 3 small cubs. "Ancestors, preserve me," Nalgoth whispered. "You see it now," Ollie Wynn said softly. "She's telling the truth." "Yes." "Lormac ordered the extermination of an intelligent species for profit." "Yes." "And I've been hunting the only person trying to stop him." "Yes." "So, what are you going to do about it, Security Chief?" Nalgoth looked at his guards, at the chaos in the cargo bay, at the empty corridor where Helen had vanished with 3 cubs who trusted her enough to fight for her. He made a decision. "All units," he said into his communicator, "stand down from pursuit. I repeat, stand down." "Sir?" Multiple confused voices responded. "You heard me. Let her reach communications. Let her broadcast whatever she wants. But Council Prime Lormac can file a formal complaint with my thorax." Ollie Wynn's delighted laughter echoed through the calm. "Now that's the kind of insubordination I can support." Nalgoth smiled, something humans had taught him to do. "I'm going to regret this, aren't I?" "Almost certainly. But you'll regret it, with honor." Honor, Nalgoth repeated. Yes, that's worth something. Somewhere in the station's maze, Helen was running toward either her salvation or her doom, with 3 cubs who'd chosen her as their family. Nalgoth rather hoped she made it. The communications hub on level 10 was exactly as heavily guarded as Helen expected. 12 armed personnel, multiple security checkpoints, biometric scanners that could identify species from across the room. The kind of setup designed to prevent exactly what she was about to attempt. She crouched in the maintenance shaft above, peering through a grate at the controlled chaos below. Technicians moved between terminals, monitoring everything from station life support to external communications. At the center sat the main broadcast console, capable of overriding every screen and audio system on the station. That was her target. "Okay, babies," she whispered to the 3 cubs pressed against her in the cramped space. "This is it. We get one shot at this." Pitch growled softly, eager. Whisper pressed closer to Helen's leg, nervous but trusting. Rumble made his namesake sound, which in this context meant something like, "I'm scared, but I'm with you." Helen had taught them so much over the past 6 months. How to hunt cooperatively, how to read body language across species, how to solve problems that required more than teeth and claws. But she'd also taught them something more important. She'd taught them courage. "Whisper, you're with me. Pitch, Rumble, I need you to create a distraction. Big, loud, scary. But no biting unless someone tries to hurt you. Understood?" 3 sets of crystalline eyes blinked at her. 3 heads bobbed in the gesture she'd taught them meant yes. "Good. On my mark." Helen positioned herself over the grate, muscles tensing. 3, 2, 1, mark. She kicked the grate open and dropped. The 10-meter fall should have broken her legs. Would have broken them if Pitch and Rumble hadn't landed first, absorbing part of her impact as she rolled across their backs and came up running. Behind her, both cubs roared, the sound reverberating through the hub like a bomb going off. Guards scrambled. Alarms shrieked. Someone screamed about megafauna breach. Helen sprinted for the main console, Whisper a shadow at her heels. A guard moved to intercept, weapon rising, but Whisper was faster. The cub didn't attack, just positioned herself between Helen and the threat. Scales bristling, teeth bared in a display that said very clearly, "Through me first." The guard hesitated. That was all Helen needed. She slammed the datapad into the console's interface port and started typing. Her fingers flew across the controls, bypassing security protocols she'd spent the past 6 hours mapping. The system fought her, throwing up barriers and warnings, but Helen had learned a long time ago that most security was designed to stop sophisticated attacks, not someone willing to use brute force coding and sheer desperation. "Pitch! Rumble! With me!" she called. The 2 cubs bounded over, taking up defensive positions. They didn't attack anyone, just made themselves into living walls around Helen, all teeth and claws and protective fury. Someone shouted orders. Someone else called for backup. Helen ignored them all, focused entirely on the console, upload the files, override the security locks, cue the broadcast. Almost there. "Helen, stop this immediately!" Lormac's voice cut through the chaos. He stood at the hub entrance, flanked by more guards, his scales flushed dark with rage. "Can't do that," Helen said, not looking up. "Kind of busy exposing your corruption to the entire station." "You're delusional, making wild accusations based on stolen data." "Stolen? I prefer liberated." Helen hit another sequence of keys. "And there's nothing wild about documented proof of species extermination for profit. That's just regular evil. Guards, remove her. Use force, if necessary." The guards moved forward. The cubs tensed, preparing to defend. Helen's heart hammered, knowing this could turn violent in seconds. Then Nalgoth stepped between them. "Stand down," he commanded. "Security chief?" Lormac's scales paled. "What are you doing?" "My job, which is protecting this station and everyone on it. That includes protecting them from corrupt council members." Nalgoth turned to Helen. "How long do you need?" 2 minutes. "You have them." "This is insubordination," Lormac shrieked. "I'll have your carapace for this, Nalgoth. I'll have you stripped of rank and exiled to where?" Olliwyn's voice rang out as she entered the hub, followed by 6 other council members. "To the same penal colonies where you plan to send anyone who questioned your mining operations? Or perhaps the same fate you arranged for the Nithara mother protecting her cubs?" Lormac's 3 eyes widened. "You have no proof." "Actually," Helen interrupted, hitting a final key with satisfaction. "Everyone's about to have proof. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1. Every screen in the communications hub flickered. Then, simultaneously, every screen on the entire station did the same. Helen's evidence played for all to see. Financial records showing shell companies funneling credits to Lormac. Communications ordering the removal of Nithara from mining zones. Environmental reports, the original and the falsified version. Contract negotiations for strip mining operations that would destroy 70% of Ormthesa's habitable land. And the footage. Clear, damning footage of mercenaries in unmarked armor gunning down a Nithara mother. In the video, 3 small cubs huddled against their dying mother, making sounds of distress that transcended species barriers. Anyone watching could understand what they were witnessing. Murder. The hub fell silent, except for the audio from the broadcast. Even the guards lowered their weapons, staring at the screens. "That footage is falsified," Lormac said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Olliwyn stepped closer. "Because I'm looking at metadata that matches mercenary company recordings. I'm seeing timestamps that correspond to known incidents on Ormthesa. I'm hearing communications in your voice, authorizing payment for services rendered." "Circumstantial. It's a confession," another council member said. A Gren this time, elderly and respected. "By all our ancestors, Lormac, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking about progress, about resources. That planet has mineral deposits worth billions, and we were letting it sit empty because of some animals." "Intelligent animals," Helen said quietly. She'd finished with the console and stood now, one hand resting on Whisper's head. The cub leaned into her touch, seeking comfort. "They have language, social structures. They mourn their dead. They protect their families. They're people, Lormac. You ordered the extermination of people. They're predators." "So are humans," Olliwyn pointed out. "So are half the species on this council. That's not a disqualification for personhood." Around the station, the broadcast continued. In cargo bays and living quarters, in docking areas and medical facilities, thousands of beings watched the evidence. Watched 3 orphaned cubs lose their mother. Watched them huddle together in fear. And then the broadcast shifted to newer footage, compiled from security cameras over the past 6 months. Helen with the cubs. Teaching them to hunt. Playing with them. Treating wounds. Reading to them because, apparently, Nithara cubs enjoyed stories even if they couldn't understand all the words. One clip showed Pitch bringing Helen something he'd caught. So proud of himself. Helen praising him, showing him how to share with his siblings. Another showed Whisper having a nightmare, whimpering in her sleep. Helen waking up, holding the cub, making soothing sounds until Whisper calmed. A third showed all 3 cubs piled on Helen during a cold night, purring that deep rumble of contentment, completely relaxed and trusting. "That," Ollie Wynne said softly, "is what family looks like." "It's unnatural," Lormac insisted, but he sounded desperate now. "Humans can't bond with—" "Humans bond with everything," Helen interrupted. "We bonded with wolves and made dogs. We bonded with wild cats and made companions. We've bonded with horses, birds, reptiles, even plants. It's what we do. We find something wild and dangerous and we say, 'I bet we could be friends.' And somehow, impossibly, we make it work. That's not how nature operates." "Maybe not your nature." Helen met his eyes, all three of them. "But it's ours. And you know what the really funny thing is? You were so busy being afraid of the Nithara, so convinced they were just mindless killing machines, that you never bothered to understand them. Never bothered to learn that they're loyal, intelligent, capable of love and grief and joy. You never gave them a chance." She gestured to the cubs around her. "These three crawled through kilometers of ventilation shafts to rescue me. They fought for me, protected me, not because I trained them or controlled them, but because I showed them kindness when they'd lost everything, because I chose to see them as people instead of threats." The broadcast ended. Silence filled the hub. Then Nalgoth spoke. "Council Prime Lormac, by the authority vested in me as security chief, I'm placing you under arrest for violation of galactic conservation protocols, fraud, conspiracy to commit genocide, and being spectacularly stupid." "That last one still isn't on the books," Ollie Wynne murmured. "It should be," Nalgoth replied. Guards moved forward, but this time they went for Lormac. He tried to protest, tried to call on his authority, but it was over. Everyone had seen the evidence. Everyone knew what he'd done. As they led him away, he shot Helen one last venomous look. "You've ruined everything." "Good," Helen said simply. The next few hours were a blur of bureaucracy. Statements given, reports filed, official apologies issued. The council voted unanimously to revoke all mining contracts on Ormthesa and declare the planet a protected conservation zone. They also voted to release Helen from all charges and offer her an official position as Nithara Conservation Ambassador. Helen accepted on the condition that she could return to Ormthesa, with the cubs, permanently. "You've earned it," Ollie Wynne said as they stood in the docking bay, preparing for departure. "You've also earned the eternal gratitude of everyone who cares about conservation. What you did was extraordinary." "What I did was basic decency," Helen corrected. "I saw beings in need and helped them. That's not extraordinary. That's just being human. Perhaps that's what makes it extraordinary." The shuttle was ready. Helen loaded her equipment, sparse as it was, while the cubs explored the docking bay with enthusiasm. Pitch found a discarded cargo container to investigate. Rumble discovered that his claws made interesting sounds on the metal decking. Whisper stayed close to Helen, still nervous in strange environments. "You know they're going to get bigger," Nalgoth said, watching the cubs. "Much bigger. Adult Nithara are apex predators." "I know. And you're comfortable living with that?" Helen smiled. "Nalgoth, I've lived with apex predators my entire career. The four-legged kind are actually easier than the two-legged ones wearing suits and sitting in council chambers." He clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter. "Fair point." "Besides," Helen added, watching Pitch tumble over his own feet trying to pounce on Rumble, "they're family. You don't abandon family." As the shuttle prepared for departure, Helen took one last look at the station. Somewhere in its halls, Lormac was sitting in a cell much like the one he'd put her in. Justice had a sense of irony sometimes. The cubs settled in the shuttle cargo area, already making themselves comfortable. Helen sat at the controls, running through pre-flight checks. "Helen!" Olliwin's voice came through the comm. "One more thing. We've been receiving reports of other orphaned Nithara, cubs who lost their parents to various incidents. Would you be willing—" "Send them down," Helen interrupted. "All of them. We'll figure it out." "That could be quite a few cubs." "Then it's a good thing I'm a quick learner." Helen grinned. "Besides, what's a few more? I've already got 3 who think I'm their mother. Might as well make it official." The shuttle lifted off, heading down toward Ormthesa's green and blue surface. Through the viewport, Helen could see the northern continent, wild and untouched, where forests stretched for thousands of kilometers, and predators ruled their territories with the casual confidence of beings perfectly adapted to their environment. Home. Pitch pressed his face against the viewport, making excited rumbling sounds. Rumble was already asleep, exhausted from the day's adventures. Whisper sat at Helen's feet, watching everything with cautious curiosity. "All right, babies," Helen said as they entered atmosphere. "Let's go home. We've got a lot of work to do. Cubs to raise, territories to establish, and apparently an entire conservation program to build from scratch." Pitch chirped questioningly. "Yes, you can help. No, you cannot eat the survey equipment. We've discussed this." The shuttle descended. Through clouds, heading for the research outpost Helen had called home for the past 6 months. It wasn't much, just a cluster of prefabricated buildings near a river where Nithara liked to hunt. But it was hers. Theirs. As they landed, the ramp extending to meet alien soil, Helen felt something settle in her chest. Relief. Purpose. The knowledge that she'd done the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost her. The cubs bounded down the ramp, immediately rolling in the grass and making sounds of pure joy. Free. Home. Safe. Helen followed them down, breathing in the scent of Ormthesa. Rain and earth and growing things. The smell of a world that would now have a chance to thrive, protected from the greed of beings who saw only resources instead of life. In the distance, she heard answering calls. Adult Nithara, welcoming the cubs home. The sound made her smile. "Welcome home, babies," she said softly. "Welcome home." And somewhere in orbit, on a station full of bureaucrats and politicians and beings from across the galaxy, everyone who'd watched Helen's broadcast went about their business with a new understanding. Humans didn't just survive. They didn't just adapt. They made families out of unlikely pieces. They turned enemies into friends. They looked at something wild and dangerous and saw possibility instead of threat. That was the thing about humans. The thing that made them both wonderful and terrifying. They didn't just exist in the universe. They made the universe theirs, one impossibly unlikely bond at a time. And if you were very lucky, they'd decide you were worth protecting. Just ask 3 Nithara cubs who'd found a mother in the most unexpected place. Or ask a council that had learned the hard way. Never, ever get between a human and her family. That lesson never ended well.